For me, the spiritual aspect is getting a feeling of, when I say, like, how can I be of service, it's not just what I can do for someone, but more, there's that feeling of something coming through me that makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing at the right time. I'm in my place to provide something of value to the world, to other people. And I get that sense as more of a spiritual sense. I feel like I'm being provided some guidance about what's there. And the way it feels to me is that I get kind of empty. I feel like I'm a little emptied, and then I'm just present. And that's different for me than if I'm being helpful, or I'm doing something because it's what I ought to do, or I'm thinking about from like an idealized self-image perspective, how good will I look if I do this? And so there's a difference there. And so when I'm focused on that, feeling the spiritual guidance, it feels to me different than when I'm thinking about how good I'm going to look, or what that's going to be like in the world. For me, it's sort of like we talk sometimes in the Pathwork about the higher self, and that touch point, if you will, between the higher self and the ego is one of those ones where there's a feeling like the ego in some sense is directing things, sort of looking through things, but at some point, if you don't get out of the way and let your higher self come through, I think you miss the high points in life. I think you miss the joyousness, you miss the pieces that are possible only when you're really connecting to like what's best in yourself. And to get that, I think sometimes we have to get out of the way of the ego, who always wants to say, me, what's best for me, I could care less about you. And it kind of gets, devolves down to more of a lower self energy, or down to the energy that says, I just want it to be my idealized self-image of how I want you to perceive me, and I'm spending all my time wondering how you are instead of letting the best of myself out. So I think that piece you said, like a membrane, is that closeness between, without the ego helping to direct, you've lost a certain intention that helps you to manifest things in life. But if all you are is your ego, I don't think you can ever achieve a feeling of true like joy and love that you get, a feeling of peace. If I'm talking with people who've done this work, what I find is that they'll tell me something very intimate about their life. They'll mention something about, in a small way, like, I was just at breakfast with my husband or wife, and we had this stupid argument over something. And someone will be very emotional, and they'll express it in a way where they're actually feeling the feelings and the energies coming through. And that's very different than if you just have a conversation with somebody, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm doing okay. And how was your morning? Oh, it was all right. And you don't really get to the core as to what someone is. So I think someone who does this work is really trying to distinguish at a smallest level. In every little interaction, they're thinking a little bit about what's happening. And there's that sense of making conscious what's happening unconscious. And I think the other piece is when people get upset, and you're around someone who hasn't done the work, they're just angry and they're just upset, and they really have no idea why, and then later they're not upset. But someone who's done the work gets upset, and we have maybe sometimes it's called an ER, or an emotional reaction, and then you go back and think a little about what just actually happened. And so to me, I'm a software developer by profession, so to me it's like slowing down a program where you actually step through and you go like, oh, there's what happened. And then what happens gradually over time is that, I think in talking with people who also have done this work, is that just before you're about to have that ER, there's something different that happens in your soul. It's not just your thoughts or your ego. Maybe it's that higher self coming in that helps to say, what's the truth here? And that, for me, is a great question that distinguishes, oh, that other person was just asking a question. They weren't trying to get inside your head or do something. So that's one of the differences between someone who's done the work maybe and someone who hasn't put that in. People in some spiritual disciplines, will have that sense of God as like, wind beneath the wings, or however that's expressed. But I think there is that feeling that it's really inside you. And to me, it's like getting clear about what's my intention, what am I trying to do in the world. And sometimes to get that, it's not just what I want, which sometimes is a forcing current, we might use that term. But another way to think of it is that I really feel that the higher self is there saying, even if you don't think you can do it, just get started. And there's that sense of a thought that you should do something that seems to come like it's the kind of thought that might occur that almost seems like it didn't come from me, even though it must have, because it's coming from my head. But it's one of those thoughts that seems to have come more from the universe. I think the Pathwork, I think the way I see it is that it all happens in a moment when you get that moment of realization, but it takes a certain amount of work to accomplish that. And so if someone says, I can come to hear a lecture and talk with somebody about it, and when I go back after 2 or 3 hours, I'll be a completely changed person. I think sometimes that isn't true, but you'll go away feeling changed, like you've discovered like a new canyon you want to explore that you didn't know was there, or it's maybe like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where behind that closet is another world you never knew was there. And so I think then you want to do the exploring and the work, and that takes some time. But what will happen over time is you may work and work on something. So for example, I've worked a lot on my defensiveness, and being a very defensive person, I can be, you know, that would come up. And I worked on that a long time, and I guess it gradually changed until finally I would notice in a situation it was gone, just like that. It wasn't there anymore. And so noticing that made me realize that you can get that change in a moment, but it's not a quick fix. It does take some work. And I think anyone who understands the benefits of good, hard work producing the result that you like would understand that that's what it takes.